Hey, I'm Kati Spaas, and I'm a world-renowned author and speaker on high sensitivity and a retired coach to professional artists and performers. Spotlight Stress is your guide to build confidence, find your superpower, and claim your shine. Today, our guest is Mark Pellegrino. He is an actor that you might know from Dexter, The Closer, Lucifer in Supernatural, Lost, or even Quantico. So the list goes on and on. And he is also active on Twitter, if you like to do some philosophizing, I would say, but I'm not sure if that is the word. But he has a YouTube channel and he does philosophy bites. So I'm more than happy to welcome Mark. Please, Mark, share us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, yeah. Well, if you're going to go to my Twitter page, be prepared to see a volatile page. It's not a place you go to see puppies necessarily or kittens. It's a place where you go to talk about ideas and talk about them seriously. And some people have a difficult time with that. And Twitter's such a huge forum. You're going to find lots of pathological folks in there putting their input in, and we try to filter them out, but it's a little bit difficult. So my Twitter page is for those who have the stomach for difficult things, difficult concepts, difficult politics, difficult values. We argue about it all as fearlessly as possible because we think the marketplace of ideas should be open. Yes. For everything. We should be talking about everything. And my reality checks are the philosophy bites. They're pinned to my profile page. And so far there's 4 of them. And I'm going to be producing 4 more in the near future. And they are about topics that are controversial today, like equality, liberty. I'm doing one on selfishness, on Democrats and Republicans, who are the 2 parties that constitute our political system out here in the United States. I'll do one on capitalism, things that drive people crazy, that they have very intense feelings about. Yes.
So how do you manage to stay calm? Because what I often see when it comes to those topics, and I have to admit, I'm the same, if you're passionate about an idea and you want to talk about that and have an open conversation, and it is so interesting to hear all sides, because very often, when you step into it with an open mind and without judgment, I often think I can relate everywhere a little bit. And then sometimes, there's things that I really can't relate to at all, but very often there's always something that can resonate with me. But when you're so passionate about something, it's very hard to stay neutral and not to want to engage and convince people that our way of seeing things might be the right way. So how do you manage to stay calm in the midst of that little bit of chaos that might be going on with those conversations?
I haven't.
Oh.
But I've tried to deflect my anger with snark and sarcasm and fun. Unfortunately, the medium, a text medium like the Twitter, 75% of your actual meaning is lost in the text. So people who are hostile to what you're thinking get more hostile to the snark and the fun you're having, because they don't quite understand the tone. So yeah, I think if it's possible to put forth that Stephen Covey idea of seeking first to understand, then be understood, we'd all be better off if we use that as a commandment of interpersonal behavior. But we don't. We have strong opinions, and I like the strong opinion. I like somebody who comes at me with total certitude, and I will challenge what they think if I disagree with it, and hopefully, we'll both be better off if the other is right. It's not like, we treat these arguments like we're losing something that could risk our lives if we lost it. But the fact is, losing a lie and finding the truth is good for you. So, having your premises questioned may threaten your identity for a bit, but in the end, you're either confirmed in the truth or you found the truth. So it's a win-win situation if you think about it. And maybe if people look at it that way, that have a different perspective about the argument.
Yeah, because very often a lot of people see these kind of discussions as something bad or negative or heavy, or that we need to get out of the way from, or they perceive it as a conflict. While I'm sure that there's many other ways to perceive these conversations. Like you say, you can only gain from them if you are open, if you are there with an open mind and want to learn and want to share without the judgments, because for sure that otherwise can bring people down and hold you back. What I see in the world is that when we talk about things, we all have our own truth, of course. You know, we all have our own vision because we were raised in a certain way, and some beliefs made it to our subconscious, making this our reality and our truth. Not necessarily the truth, but it is our truth. So very often people find it hard to see things from a different perspective because they are only seeing it from their truth, which they think is the reality. So do you find people to be open from themselves in those kind of conversations?
Well, you just made an important distinction that I think is disappearing in the discourses. You talked about someone's subjective truth, and then there being such a thing as an objective truth, a thing that's out there, whether we like it or not. I think people now have adopted a sort of subjectivity and relativism with respect to what exists out there. They claim that there's scientific evidence to confirm that there's nothing but these maps of meaning that we create in our heads and then implant on the world. We don't really see the world as it is. And when you have people who believe that, it's extremely difficult to agree on anything. It's extremely difficult to get them to see another point of view, even though they acknowledge that, you know, their perspective is subjective and so is yours. They fight desperately for the objectivity of that subjectivity, right? They don't think that there is such a thing as an objective reality to even get to, and that becomes a very problematic obstacle to overcome when you're trying to actually get at reality. When you have people denying it on a mass scale. I mean, the most popular, the new thing now, the popular thing in woke culture is standpoint epistemology, which essentially says there's no objective reality. There's only these spaces that you exist in, and you perceive things from these spaces in a hierarchy. And the lower you are in the hierarchy, the more of those spaces you perceive, and the higher you are in the hierarchy, the less of those spaces you perceive. So technically, the more rich and powerful you are, the less you know, and the more oppressed and beaten up, the more you know. And this is taken as a fact inherent in the way people interact, and it's becoming a means by which, a standard by which people are evaluating others. So I could have a conversation with somebody who's in a different part of the quote unquote social hierarchy and be condemned outright as knowing nothing because I'm a white guy.
Yeah.
Who happens to be in a particular socioeconomic class, or so they perceive. And so I have no sense of truth. I don't know what's going on in the world. Those types of people are very, very difficult to connect with. Yeah, their epistemology says you can't connect with them.
Yeah, but again, from their truth, because also that is not the truth. That's why it's always so interesting. We all exist from energy, and we're all energy, so we're all connected. But we get separated because of the ego in our brain, and because we create separatism. That's the word in English. Sometimes I translate too literal, but we create the part of us being separated from the whole, making us feel even more separated, making us putting other people in these boxes that we actually don't know anything of, but we're putting them there because we have this idea that they are this or they are that. Well, actually, we don't have a clue. Well, when we center and we come back to ourselves and we just connect with unity, that to me, that feels so much more aligned. The judgment just fades away. There's just nothing left but love for each other and just being. But that's not always the reality, not for me either. It's not because I think that that is the way that my life exists that way. I'm also human. I also have my ego that is in my way every once in a while. So that's not always a natural state to achieve. How do you look at that?
I don't think that state is the state that I want to achieve. I like separateness. I think separateness is an evolution. I think a tribal commonality, common consciousness way of looking at the world is an old way of looking at the world. And we evolved out of that with our understanding of science and the discoveries that our consciousnesses are separate. Now, that I think there are things that unite us. There are aspects to our humanity that we can all find common ground in. We're rational. We have potentiality to be rational, choosing beings. And within that, there's a tremendous amount of commonality. But it's an evolution to say we're separate, individuated beings. And that does not deny commonality. It doesn't deny likeness. It doesn't deny love or even respect for your neighbor. To me, it's a false dichotomy to say separateness is an atomization of human beings, and it cuts us off from other people and makes us not understand them. Frankly, the worst societies in the world are the ones that try to make us collectively the same, that try to bring us together in brotherly love. Those are the ones who murder the most people and oppress the most people. It's the ones who have acknowledged the separateness of each person, the sovereignty of each individual, that have, I think, that have understood what makes us common to each other, what our common connection is our sovereignty and our faculty of reason. That we don't have the same minds and we don't have the same stomachs. We have a responsibility to think on our own and digest food on our own. We not to be placed in some box with a horde of other people and pretend there's such a thing as brotherly love. No, there's brotherly respect and consideration and understanding for the fact that somebody's coming at a problem from a different angle than you and from a different worldview. But I think that the utopian vision of all of us in this together as a unit is just that. I think it's not there, and we've been searching for something that's not there and can never be there, and we've been labeling separateness as something evil, something driven by the lower part of our nature, this thing we call ego, which we automatically assume is this voracious, greedy monster that wants to undo his neighbor or gain something at his neighbor's expense. And I don't think any of that logically follows, especially given the evidence that collective societies always end up in the crapper, and societies that respect individuality to a degree thrive.
Yeah, and there are also studies that the societies who are more living in community and then I don't mean like that we all have to be from the same, unity, but just where people are still looking out for each other, that there are, better psychology results, there are better healthcare, they live longer, all those things. But let's be honest, I agree with you. I just think that feeling separate is what very often people who might not be as conscious or as aware might be the reason why they put other people in boxes, because they think there is something wrong with them because they are different from them and they don't know what that means. So to me, it's like both is there. I don't want to be connected with everyone else all the time. Don't get me wrong, because I live on my own little island. I love being on my own. And I think that is actually what makes me happiest as well. As long as I have my animals and the nature, I'm happy. But
I mean, there's a difference between separateness and alienation. Separateness is just a metaphysical reality. Alienation is a psychological problem. And I think the thinkers and philosophers of our day many of them in the Enlightenment didn't help with this psychological problem. They exacerbated it. They exacerbated it by focusing on institutions that enabled us to be sovereign and claiming those caused alienation. I mean, Marx himself claimed that capitalism, the only system where you could be free and sovereign and decide how your life goes and what you can purchase and whom your associations are with, he claimed that system in itself caused alienation because it broke people apart in this atomized way and desocialized people, which is completely wrong. It's the only benevolent system in the world. Because it lets people be free to associate with whom they choose to be free with. Far from alienating people, he would say that because, if you want to be a painter, you have to go work at a store for a while, and you can't be a painter. And in our system, in socialism, you can be a painter one day, a sculptor the next day, you can sing, you can do anything you want. You don't have to work for a living. Unfortunately, that's metaphysically unreachable. It's untrue, it's unsound. And he felt that, having to do a job that pays the bills, but may not be expressly what you want to do in life, limited your freedom and caused alienation because it separated you from your true self. All of that I don't agree with.
You don't agree with which part?
I don't agree with what Marx's assessment of alienation. I think it is a psychological phenomenon. It's real. It's true. I think the thinkers of the world have made it worse by claiming the things that actually free you, actually bind you and to servitude. And they have made the feeling of sovereignty they've made the feeling of sovereignty the militarized zone, the place you can't go, because it causes alienation, and I don't think it does.
What I notice in day-to-day life is that it's just those people who are stuck in a job that they really don't love, who have the biggest issues with people who are thriving and who are doing their thing and who are making it in life, because it's so confrontational for them. And they cannot understand it because that is the way they were raised or the way they think or whatever it is, or they get stuck.
You just hit it. There's two ways to live your life: as if you're determined by everything outside of you, or as if you're a sovereign human being who can make your own destiny. Now, if you embrace the latter, that you're a sovereign human being with free will who can embrace your destiny, that doesn't mean that you will necessarily achieve your ends, but it means you have a certain degree of control over your world. But that also means that you have to accept certain responsibilities and maybe certain discomfort. If you're in a job that you don't like, that doesn't pay you a remunerative wage, you think you want to move up in the world, that's valid. And that's a valid discontent to have. But does that discontent lead you to passive resentment because your place in life has thrown you in this position where you feel now you're stuck and can't get out? Or does that discontent lead you to do something about it, to start taking classes that make you a more marketable commodity in the world? I don't mean to speak about people as commodities, but if you want more, then you have to do something to earn that. That's just the way the world works. And I feel like these people that rage at people who are thriving when they're not, in part are raging at the way the world is. They're raging at the fact that the world is conditional, and you're not granted automatic immunity from the conditions of life because you exist as a human being. You're just as subject to the problem of living as a bird or an ant or anything else that has to work to live. And if you want to improve your lot, you have to engage. You can't just sit, or if you're not, sit back and know you're being passive. And I think the rage at people who are succeeding or thriving from these folks comes in part from a displacement of their own anger at themselves for not doing what they need to do to press on and get better.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's beautifully put, very simple, in the way that you can always choose to take control over your own life, and you are the director of. I always like to see it as your life is your movie. You are the star, and you are the director. You get to play it the way you want. You're the writer, the director, the star, and you're the captain of your ship, and there's no one else who can do it but you.
This is true. And writers writing, when they write something, oftentimes it doesn't turn out the way they thought it would. Either it turns out worse or better, but whatever it is, they didn't feel, necessarily in complete control of the product. And so, like in life, you are the captain of your own destiny. It doesn't mean you're going to arrive there.
No,
it doesn't. The story might not end the way you want it to. And it's part of what sucks and is beautiful about life. the unpredictability and capriciousness sometimes of it is awe-inspiring at the same time that it's very frustrating. But man, as human beings, we can work through that frustration, and even if we can't attain our goals, we can become better than where we started. We could go further than where we started.
It's all about continuing to reinvent yourself as a person, as a human being. And I think that those moments when you think, fuck, everything is going wrong, those moments are just the obstacles, are just detour to the right direction. Maybe there's something else you need to learn, or maybe you still have to grow, or maybe in your case, if it's an actor, your acting needs to step up its game, or maybe there's just another direction that might lead to interesting ways. I always think that that's the hardest thing for me personally in life, to surrender to those things, because sometimes it's easy to keep control in your own hands, which is good. I love that. I do that. And sometimes, like you say, the path leads you elsewhere, and then you need to surrender. And you need to jump on the train so that you can keep on growing and moving as a person. And that is one, for me, that was one of the most difficult things, to surrender to that, because I wanted to keep control too tight,
Yeah, for sure. You have to be open. It's an art, right? Living is an art.
Living is an art.
Knowing what you have control over and what you don't, and not investing emotionally in the things you don't have control over, takes a great deal of time to learn, let alone master. And most of us, I don't think, ever get there, no matter how high a position we reach or how long we live on this earth. When you talk about maybe I have something more to learn, of course you do. As long as you're alive, you have something more to learn. Human need is insatiable, and that includes the human need for knowledge. It's never done.
No.
Even if you're the most educated human being in the world, you know a tiny fraction of the cumulative knowledge there is in the world, the tiniest fraction. This is why centralized controls of government, for example, don't work, because you put experts in panels to attempt to control economies that are dealing with millions upon millions of people in complex relationships. They know this much in comparison to all those millions of people. That's why free markets work better, because all those minds are working together in their own way, based on signals that the market are giving them that no genius, no supercomputer can even sort out, right? We have supercomputers trying to figure out what's going on in the environment, and they're always wrong. They're always wrong because the environment is complex. Its nuances are, there's so many elements that go into what makes for the weather. We could barely tell you how the weather's going to be in 4 days, let alone 100 years. So the point is, knowledge is insatiable. Life is insatiable. Your need to know is insatiable, and you can't know enough ever.
sometimes what I notice is that people who truly know a lot, there's knowing a lot, there's knowing, but the people who are really evolved and aware consciously and intellectually and emotionally, and they know a lot, the more they know that they know nothing, that just a fraction, like you said, of everything there is to know, because there's so much more. And I always think if you stop learning, then you're dead, because we keep learning till we die. You said that your fans helped you find your father and your origin story. So I'm super excited to learn more about that. What was the process? What was going on? Are you up for sharing that with us?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just have to give you a little preamble. So my mother was married to a man named Bill Pellegrino. I say his full name now because he's passed away. So,
okay.
And they had a very complex and volatile relationship. And they were often splitting up and getting back together, splitting up and getting back together. And one time they split up for a period of time and then got back together. And during that time, I was born. And then they split up when I was around 2, and then Bill stopped seeing me around the age of 4. And he came into my life 2 more brief times. When I was 18, he sent me a $100 check for graduation out of the blue. He hadn't paid child support or treated me like I was a son, but for some reason felt it necessary to give me $100, a little note saying good luck in life, and that was it. And then he came into my life in my 30s, after I had co-written and acted in a short film called Little Surprises, which was nominated for an Academy Award. I only mention that because I think it's significant for what happened later. And he wanted to reconcile with me. So we went out to dinner together and talked and reconciled, because he wouldn't take responsibility for not wanting me as his son. He claimed other things were in the way. And I didn't buy that. And he wanted to be my friend. I said, look, my friends are honest with me. You're not honest with me, so you can't be my friend. At the end of the day, he gave me a picture of, he asked me if I wanted a picture. I said, sure. He gave me a headshot. So I suspect that the reason he wanted to connect with me was because he thought I could advance his career as an actor. Didn't even know he was an actor in some way. And then we lost touch until a Pellegrino cousin contacted me and said I should get to Las Vegas because my father was dying. So my wife and I quickly went to Vegas, and I stood over what I think was my father's deathbed as he passed away before my eyes, and felt nothing, to be honest with you, because we had no relationship. Now, flashback, when I'm 23 years old, I get back from a vacation with a girlfriend, and I'm showing my mom pictures of the vacation in Hawaii. And she looks at a picture and she says, wow, you look so much like Jerry. Okay, Bill Pellegrino was my father's name. And here I am at 23, and my mother's telling me my father may be a guy named Jerry.
Interesting.
And she proceeds to tell me a story that, when she was split up, and one of the times she was split up with my named father, she had a relationship with another married person. His name was Gerald Goler, and he was the president of some foreign acquisitions of the bank that she worked at. And he was a very dynamic guy. He spoke lots of languages. He was a musician, et cetera. She told me this whole story about him, and I remembered it and did nothing about it. I don't know why, but I had no desire to pursue that story. It's unfortunate, I think, because I think I would have liked him. Anyway, just out of the blue, during COVID, I asked my fans if they would like to help me find my biological father. And a bunch of people said yes, and particularly this one who I have frequent contact with. Her name is Teresa. She said, sure. And I gave her and a couple others my father's name and where he lived, and within an hour, they found an obituary. He had passed away in 2008. Now, it sounded right. He was from Germany. He spoke many languages. Was the president of this banking organization. But the problem was, it said he had a daughter. And from the story that my mother told me, he was married and had 4 children. So I was like, this can't be him, because he had 4 kids. An hour later, I get a message. Well, actually, this isn't the full obituary. He was married before, had 4 children, divorced, then married this other woman with whom he had the daughter.
Oh.
So this fit perfectly into the narrative that I was given. In fact, later on, I heard from one of my relatives that he came back after he divorced his first wife to my mother. But by then, my stepfather was in my life, who was a horrible human being. But he was in my life, and my mom chose my stepfather over him. He went away and promptly married his I guess, high school sweetheart from Germany. And then they had my sister Claudia. So this person also found my sister Claudia. And she said, oh, she happens to be a real estate agent living in Northern California. Here's her email address. So I emailed her and gave her my IMDb profile, said, look, I'm not a nut. I just found out that we may be related to each other. I'd like to contact you and maybe we can get a DNA test. She was blown out of the water. She contacted me, and over time, so there were some work interferences and stuff. We couldn't get the exact DNA. We couldn't get the DNA test till later, but we got a DNA test and it confirmed that we were siblings.
Thanks. Oh, wow.
And she and I have very similar upbringings, very similar, sense of being on the outside of a family, because, the 4 kids lived in New York and Montreal, and they never really talked to her. And then I met all of them. So it turns out I have 5. I have 2 sisters and 3 brothers. And all this time I thought I was an only child, mostly an orphan in my life, looking for a family. And there they are. So now I talk every day with my sister Claudia, who lives up north. And we're very close. And I talk less frequently with my siblings on the East Coast, but occasionally with my oldest brother. His name's Christian, really cool guy. They all speak multiple languages, so I'm really pissed because my sister speaks fluent German, English, and Spanish. My brother Christian speaks fluent French, German, Spanish, like Mandarin. I mean, it's all over the place. And apparently my dad could do that. He was the type of guy who could go to a country and within a week be conversant in the language. So he was a polyglot. And he was also sort of a savant on instruments. So he could sit down, play the piano. He could play the harp. He could play anything. He just had that ear for music. And that cleared up some things for me too. Yeah. As I started taking guitar lessons in my 40s. And in a couple of months, I was playing Jim Croce, Led Zeppelin. I was trying to play Stevie Ray Vaughan, and my coach was like, "This is crazy. I've never known somebody who could pick up an instrument like this at your age, and not be playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but like doing this other stuff." I should have kept up with that, but I didn't. So anyway, that's the story. Teresa, especially the fan who helped me, was especially helpful in that area. But now I know my biological family.
That is not your everyday story. But as soon as you start to talk about your father and his interests, I thought, oh yeah, that's probably the guy. I can see you as a person being highly gifted, and very often when we're highly gifted, that means, first of all, we have an IQ of 130 or more. I'm also highly gifted. I've been tested, but 80% of highly gifted people are also highly sensitive people, because our brain has a deeper way of processing information. And we also have a more activated right hemisphere of the brain, which is where you get your languages, your music, your acting, your empathy to be able to be a good actor. And that just like, and that the way that you like to, use philosophy to view the world, those things that are very recognizable for being highly gifted. So I was already thinking it a little bit, but when you mentioned these things, I'm like, okay, there you see the puzzle like is getting complete of a part of you. And is that something you can recognize yourself in?
I would never call myself gifted. In fact, I feel pretty slow, but I try to do a lot with what I have.
And every highly gifted person thinks that he's not smart enough or not, fast enough, because I said the same thing when I found out. And the woman who was giving a seminar on highly gifted people, she said straight away, that's a highly gifted person would never say of him or herself that they are the smartest in the room, or that they're highly gifted because they think that they are so smart, because very often it shows itself in different ways in life as well.
Right.
Very often the numbers are even that very often they don't even have a degree. I only got my degree at 32 or 33 years old. So for me, it was the same. I did not have that regular way of building up a career, because my path just took me different ways, because people don't always get you, because sometimes we speak a different language than other people, because we think in different ways. And I see with a lot of artists, the highly gifted part, without having to be interested in intellectual, because you seem to be very interested in all the intellectual stuff and in philosophizing and all those things, but it doesn't always even have to be the case. Very often it's just that we think about how the universe works, why we are here on earth, what is our purpose of life, all these things, which I also hear in your stories, is something that is very, very present for us. That's just the way our brain works. Well, there's a lot of other people who don't ever think about those things the way that we can really get into it, So that's interesting to me, because there is a lot of connection between us like-minded people, because very often we feel misunderstood in the world. Have you ever felt that, or do you have something like, oh no, I've always felt very comfortable with everyone around? And
oh no, I feel very misunderstood. All you have to do is go to Tumblr and look at the Twitter compilation that people who hate me are compiling, and you'll in fact recently a few of the haters just jumped on a guy who said he wanted to do a video about me, and they jumped on him making claims that I'm things that I'm not. And he said he apologized. He took down the video, but he also said, look, I'll listen to what you're saying. So far, I haven't seen anything that indicates that Mark is the things that you're claiming he is. And then even later on, when I talked to him on direct message, he said, these guys, there's nothing, you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes you're spicy with people, who are spicy to you, but you're not what they're claiming you are. So there's a group of determined nihilistic haters. I say nihilistic because I don't think they like anything. I think they're permanently aggrieved, and that's the way they get power in the world, is by pushing that grievance onto the world and making people accommodate it. And they've made a target out of me, and it's easy to feel isolated and like you're not really understood, because they're distorting you so much, because their own perceptual prism is so twisted that they can't really see you. So and I don't even know that I've been really seen by Hollywood either. I mean, Hollywood doesn't doesn't tap me or know what I am. And I hold myself responsible for that. I am different than most people I know out there. And I've always been on the outside and always been sort of on the fringes, always looking through the glass at the people enjoying the dinner and wondering if I was ever going to be in the restaurant with them. And when I am in the restaurant with them, I sort of wonder why I'm in the restaurant with them and think I should probably be outside. But I don't feel like Hollywood understands me, because I'm weirder than the typical actor is weird. I hold ideas that I don't think are typical in Hollywood, and I feel about things in a way that I don't think is typical.
Yeah, I get that. And that's what I see with most people I work with in the industry, because a lot of, let's just keep it in acting, a lot of actors feel misunderstood and feel not seen or heard. And I think that's so interesting, because the world looks at you and sees you in this show or in this movie, and they think like, wow, that's so cool, he's got it all together, But the reality is that it doesn't matter who you are and where you are in life. You can always feel like you say, isolated or different or misunderstood. And that is part of what I've noticed, the highly sensitive part, the highly gifted part, is that we very often, even as a kid, I felt like an alien on earth. And I was a social kid, and I was, good at things that I wanted to do. I was active, I was wild, I could do things, and I had friends, but I always felt like I didn't fit in the world. Like this was not my place, like an alien on earth. And that only changed when I started really doing my mindset work, because that just made me claim my own space, the way, like, we were talking about being the captain of your own ship, but then in that, on a cellular level, not just about the things we do, but also about the person who we are. And that, for me, that changed everything, because now, before, I could think a lot about death and, not wanting to live, because I just felt so, I'll use the word separated, but I think you mean isolated. So that might just be a little bit lost in translation there. But the thing is that now I feel so grateful. I feel so empowered and loved, if it's not by myself, it's by my family, my friends, the people I surround myself with. And that is just such a different way of perceiving life and everything that goes on in it. And that's just, for me, that's the reason why I do this work. That's the reason why I coach artists, because I see that they're so misunderstood, that nobody gets what they're talking about. But I felt it, I know what that means, because I've been there, and I've been rock bottom with that shit, and with feeling so bad about myself. That is why this work is like, it's so interesting, just because we're all different, yet there are similarities in how we feel and how we express that in the world, and how we can still hold ourselves back in life by not fully owning that. And I think it's amazing that you say that you're weird and that you're different from others, because that is why when you do an acting job, you are the best guy for the role, because you are not mainstream. Who the hell wants to see 20 of the same guys in the show? You want to see someone who excels because he embodies the role, because he is so different.
Yeah.
And that is probably the reason why you're so good at what you do. Can you relate to that, or do you feel completely different? Because that's possible.
Yes, I can relate to that.
Yeah, okay, interesting. One last question, Mark. What is next for you? What is the future for you? What's your vision? Where do you want to go next with your life and your career?
Well, I'm on a show right now for Showtime called American Rust, and it appears to be doing very well. So hopefully that means there'll be a season 2 for us, in which case I'm hoping to be in Pittsburgh again in the winter. But we'll see. Nothing is a done deal in this business and in this world. So if that doesn't go, I'll just keep doing what I do, which is teaching internationally with my wife, and plugging away for the next job. I am going to be guest starring on 911. I took this job in this week, even though I have to prepare to go to Paris by the 18th of October. I'm cramming this in before I go to Paris and teach with my wife. And to continue to do my reality checks, continue to do podcasts. I wrote an article with my partner for Rolling Stone about bullying, and I'm planning on writing more articles for Rolling Stone about how to deal with social media bullying and the phenomenon of scapegoating, which I think is very interesting. We've raised money to do a documentary about it. So hopefully the director producer that we have, who's now busy doing other movies, will get back to us so we can do this doggone documentary. So that's a lot, I think. That's a lot of hope that I hope gets fulfilled in the next few months.
A lot of cool and diverse things that are going on, which is probably what you need to keep it interesting too. And can you tell me a little bit more about the teaching? Because we didn't get into that yet. What are you teaching with your wife?
We teach the Meisner technique. Sanford Meisner was a great acting teacher who founded the neighborhood playhouse in New York City. And he taught great actors like Gregory Peck and Jon Voight, Robert Duvall, famous like Lee Strasberg and Stella Adler. They all came from the same group of actors that formed the group theater in the 30s. So we teach that technique, and we taught it for years at Playhouse West in Studio City for about 14 or 15 years together. And then we started moving abroad. I got asked about 4 years ago to teach at the Paris Film Institute. And I made it a stipulation that my wife come with me and we co-teach. And from there, we taught at another place for a couple of years. And now my wife has been in Paris for the past year, pretty much, forming her own school and, getting the proper papers so she could work in Paris, and she's now got it up and running for the fall semester. So she's been teaching. So I'm going to join her and teach more of this crazy thing called the Meisner technique.
Wow, that's so interesting. And did you know that Paris is only 4 hours away from here, where I am at?
Yeah. Yes.
So that's like making it a small world again. So that's interesting.
In fact, the person who's living at our house right now, who watches our animals when we're away, is from Belgium.
Oh, really? You're kidding me. No. Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite places. I do like visiting there.
Really? That's
sure.
Nice. We do have the best chocolate, I have to say. We do.
Yes, I always gain weight when I'm there.
Yeah, me too, which is all year long.
And in my drinking days, it was the chocolate and the beer. So I went, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, Belgium is we do have great beers. That's true.
Yeah.
Oh, Mark, thank you so much. This has been such an interesting conversation. Thank you for sharing all your insights and your view on the world and life, and for being so open as well and sharing your personal stuff with us, because that was also quite the experience that we were able to follow, thanks to your openness. So thank you so much for being here with us, and I hope we stay in touch.
We will. Thank you.